Now, every successful musician builds their career on the people who support them, the fans who show up, who believe in them, the ones who stay loyal. But sometimes that same connection turns into something much darker. And in the stories we're about to look at today, that's exactly what happened. Selena Quintanilla was born on April 16th, 1971, in Lake Jackson, Texas. She was an American singer with Mexican heritage, who would go on to become one of the most influential Latin artists of all time. She was widely known as the Queen of Tejano music, a genre that blends Mexican, European, and American sounds into something completely unique. And for a long time, that sound stayed regional, but with artists like the late Emilio Navaira and Selena herself, Tejano music eventually went global. Selena was the youngest of 3 children, and her career didn't start in studios or through labels. It started at home. She started singing as a child, and her father, Abraham Quintanilla Jr., saw something in her early, and by the time she was just 9 years old, he had formed a family band, Selena y los Dinos. From that point on, this wasn't just a hobby anymore. Her life became music. As the band started gaining traction, Selena had to stop attending school in the 8th grade because of how much they were performing. She would later go back and earn her GED. But at the time, everything was focused on building something bigger with the music, and it started paying off very early. At just 15 years old, she won Female Entertainer of the Year at the Tejano Music Award, a title she would go on to win year after year. You could already see it. She wasn't just talented, she had presence.
Tejano USA, like I said, we've got all the big artists. Guess who we got here? Selena Quintanilla. Selena, bienvenidos a Tejano USA.
Thank you, Waldos. Good to be here.
Nice to see you.
By the early 90s, Selena had become one of the biggest names in Latin music. Her albums were selling, her shows were growing, and she was building a fan base that was deeply connected to her, not just as an artist, but as a person. Then in 1994, she reached a whole new level. Selena won a Grammy for Best Mexican-American Album, becoming the first female Tejano artist to ever do it. At that point, she wasn't just representing a genre anymore. She was redefining what it could be. And her influence wasn't limited to music. Selena had a strong sense of identity, especially when it came to fashion. She designed her own outfits, built a signature look, and eventually turned that into a business, opening 2 boutiques called Selena Etc., where she combined music, culture, and style into one brand. By 1995, Selena Quintanilla wasn't just a singer. She was a movement. She was on the verge of crossing fully into the mainstream, working on her first English language album, something that was expected to take her to an entirely new level of fame. Everything was expanding, her career, her business, her influence. It felt like she was just getting started, but right around that same time, something else was developing behind the scenes, because the person who would eventually end her life wasn't a stranger in the crowd. She wasn't just someone who appeared out of nowhere. She was someone Selena had trusted, someone who had been let into her world, and that's what changes the story entirely. It started like a lot of these stories do, with genuine admiration. Around 1991, a woman by the name of Yolanda Saldivar, who worked as a nurse, reached out to Selena's father with an idea. She wanted to start an official fan club, and she wasn't just a casual supporter. She came across as organized, motivated, and willing to put in real time into building something. So the family said yes, and at that point Yolanda was working as an in-home nurse, but she eventually gave that up to fully invest herself in running Selena's fan club, even though it meant earning less than she did before. That's how committed she appeared. And even though she didn't meet Selena in person until December 1991, once she did, things moved quickly. The two became close. Selena trusted her, the family trusted her, and just like that, Yolanda Saldivar went from being just a fan to being the person in charge of Selena's entire fan community. And as the Queen of Tejano's career expanded, so did Yolanda's role. By 1994, Selena had launched 2 boutiques under the name Selena Etc., motivated by her passion for fashion and beauty services. Yolanda eventually took on a management role connected to those businesses, which meant she now had access to financial records, operations, and day-to-day running of Selena's brand. This part is worth paying attention to, as Yolanda began as a fan, but at this point in the story, she had become something much closer. She now had the type of access, trust, and proximity that takes time to build. But as everything was growing on the outside, behind the scenes, things were starting to shift. In early 1995, Selena's family began receiving complaints. At first, it wasn't anything too crazy, just small concerns from fans, people saying they had paid for merchandise but never received anything. Orders going missing, money unaccounted for, and when they started to look into this, the numbers just didn't really add up. There were clear financial inconsistencies tied to both the fan club and Selena's boutiques, and at the center of it all was Yolanda Saldivar. That's when things got serious. Selena's father, Abraham, decided to investigate this further, and what he found completely changed the situation. According to him, Yolanda had embezzled over $60,000 from Selena's businesses, using forged checks from both the fan club and the boutiques. At that point, this wasn't just about mismanagement anymore. This was straight up theft. So a meeting was then set up. Abraham, Selena, and another associate sat down with Yolanda to confront her directly. He presented her with the evidence, the missing money, the checks, everything, and Yolanda's response she didn't deny any of it. She didn't explain it. She didn't even try to defend herself. She just stared at him in silence. Typical thief behavior. No answers, no reaction, and that silence said everything. As they dug deeper, even more details started coming out. It was discovered that Yolanda had opened the fan club's bank account under her sister's name, not her own. And when she was asked about it, she claims the bank wouldn't allow her to open an account under her name, though she could never really explain why that was the case. At this point, the trust was already broken. What started as a fan relationship turned into access, then responsibility, and now it was turning into something much darker. After this, her father banned Yolanda from contacting Selena, but Selena still felt like Yolanda was, essential to her business operations, so she stayed in touch with her. However, at that point, things had already shifted. Despite her initial reluctance, Selena told one of her associates on March 25th, 1995, that she was planning on terminating Yolanda's employment soon. And it made sense because it turns out that Yolanda had just been doing a whole bunch of shady shit behind the scenes with her businesses and her money, right? Writing forged checks under her sister's name, cashing them, and then keeping that money. All of this was uncovered through the investigation led by Selena's father. So by early March 1995, Selena's family had seen enough. Yolanda was fired from everything, the fan club, the boutiques, all of it. This relationship that had been built over years, the trust that had grown from fan to insider to someone managing parts of Selena's life, was officially over. But the situation itself wasn't over because Yolanda still had something Selena needed, the financial records. Then came March 31st, 1995. That morning in Corpus Christi, Texas, Selena went to the Days Inn motel where Yolanda was staying. The reason wasn't emotional. It was business. She needed these papers, right? She needed the documents, the financial records tied to the fan clubs and the boutiques, mainly for tax purposes. And those documents were in Yolanda's possession. But even in that moment, things were not straightforward. That same morning, Yolanda told Selena that she had been sexually assaulted while in Mexico, a claim that looking back appears to have been an attempt to stall, to delay handing over the documents to Selena. And despite that fact, Selena still showed up. Despite everything that had already happened, the tension, the accusations, the broken trust, she took Yolanda to the hospital because she told her that she was sexually assaulted in Mexico, so it made sense. She took her to the hospital. Whatever complicated feelings existed between them at that point, Selena still treated her like someone she cared about. She was a good person, right? After that, they returned to the motel, and that's where everything changed. Inside the room, Selena began going through Yolanda's belongings, a satchel filled with documents related to the fan club and the boutiques. But inside that bag was a .38 caliber revolver. Yolanda grabbed it and pointed it at Selena. In that moment, Selena tried to leave. She turned and she ran, and that's when Yolanda pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Selena in the back, severing a major artery. Critically wounded, Selena didn't collapse right there. She ran. She made it out the room, across the motel, and into the lobby. And as she collapsed on the floor, with staff rushing toward her, she managed to say two things. She named her attacker, Yolanda, she said, and she gave them the room number, room 158. In her last moments of consciousness, she also stated, "Lock the door, she'll shoot me again," before collapsing. Those were some of her last coherent moments. She was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was already too severe. At 1:05 p.m., Selena Quintanilla Perez was pronounced dead. She was 23 years old. Back at the motel, Yolanda had retreated to her truck in the parking lot. What followed was a standoff with police that lasted more than 9 hours. During it, she threatened to take her own life. Yolanda eventually surrendered, but by that point, she had already killed Selena. Selena was laid to rest on April 3rd, 1995, at Seaside Memorial Park in Corpus Christi. The public mourning was massive, the kind that happens when a generation loses someone who felt like theirs. On October 23rd, 1995, a jury convicted Yolanda Saldivar of first-degree murder. The defense argued the gun went off accidentally. However, the jury rejected that. She was sentenced to life in prison, with parole eligibility after 30 years under Texas law. 30 years later, in March 2025, that review came. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles denied parole, citing the nature of the offense. The next scheduled review is March 2030. And as of 2026, Yolanda Saldivar remains incarcerated in Texas. Out of all the stories we're going to talk about in this video, personally, this one hit me the hardest. It's not to take away from the others because they're all sad, all horrific in their own way, but this one feels different. I think it's the nature of it. This wasn't a stranger. This was someone who got close to Selena, someone who had trust, access, real proximity. And it just reminds you of something uncomfortable. You never really know people or the intentions they might have for you. This was a young woman who had her entire life in front of her. She was building something real, doing so many great things, and all of it was taken away by someone who had her trust. Selena was a talented young woman with a lot to live for, and it's sad that it was taken away at the hands of a lunatic. The next story we're going to cover is from almost 10 years ago, and it's the Christina Grimmie story. Christina Victoria Grimmie was born on June 12, 1994, in New Jersey. She was an American singer, songwriter, and internet personality who built something most artists at the time couldn't fully understand: a direct, unfiltered connection with her audience. She grew up in a close family. Her mother worked as a receptionist until a breast cancer diagnosis. Her father worked at Verizon Communications, and she had an older brother named Marcus, who would later become her road manager. She was of Italian and Romanian descent. At just 6 years old, her father noticed she could sing, and by 10, she had started playing the piano. The talent was always there. It just needed somewhere to be shown. In 2009, at 15 years old, Christina found that place. She created a YouTube channel under the username ZeldaXLove64 and started posting videos. Her goal wasn't complicated, she just wanted people to connect with her music. No label backing, no industry support, just a teenager with a camera and something real to offer. Her first real moment of recognition came that same year, when her cover of Miley Cyrus' Party in the USA started spreading. People noticed immediately. Not because she could sing, but because of how she sang, her voice, her personality, the way she made a well-known song feel completely her own. That combination was what set her apart from the beginning. Over the next few years, she built a large and genuinely loyal audience, the kind of fan base that didn't just stream her music, they showed up for her. Eventually, that momentum carried her to Los Angeles, where she went to pursue her career seriously. And in 2014, she auditioned for season 6 of NBC's singing competition, The Voice. Everything was moving in the right direction. Her audience was growing. Her profile was rising, and it felt like she was right on the edge of something much bigger. And in 2014, after she finished third on The Voice, her audience continued to grow, but more importantly, her reach did. She wasn't just visible anymore, she was accessible. However, somewhere in that growing audience, one viewer started watching differently. Around 2015, a man named Kevin James Lobel discovered Christina Grimmie online. Kevin was a man who lived in St. Petersburg, Florida, and worked part-time at Best Buy, a job he had held for over 8 years, but outside of that, there wasn't much else. People who knew him described him as a recluse, someone who kept himself. Detached from the outside world, he rarely left his room, unless it was time for him to go to work. And socially, his world was almost non-existent. He had only one real connection, one friend. Not long after discovering Christina, something shifted. What started as admiration quickly turned into something much deeper. Kevin became consumed. He would spend most of his waking hours watching her videos, tracking her posts, monitoring her online presence. All of it was, of course, one-sided. Despite how closely he followed her, Kevin didn't even have his own social media accounts. There was no real interaction between them, no connection, just observation. And over time, that fixation didn't fade, it intensified. By late 2015 into early 2016, his obsession had been building for somewhere between 6 months to a year, quietly, privately, but steadily becoming more entrenched. And eventually, it started to spill out in the real world. Around this time, Kevin told his only friend, Corey, that Christina Grimmie was his soulmate, not a celebrity he admired, not an artist he looked up to, but someone he believed he was meant to be with. And when Corey pushed back on us, Kevin didn't take it lightly. He became defensive, agitated, like this wasn't something he was willing to question, because in his mind, this wasn't a fantasy, it was real. And then his behavior started to change. Physically, Kevin began trying to transform himself. He lost weight, got LASIK eye surgery, even had hair implants, all of it with one goal in mind: to make himself more appealing for Christina, someone he had never met. Because through all this, keep in mind, Kevin was just still a fan, okay? One person in a massive audience. Christina had no idea who he was. No interaction, no connection, just a one-sided relationship, one-sided belief that only existed in his mind. And around him, nobody saw this coming. His family didn't know. Nothing had been reported. Everything was happening quietly. Until late May, that's when things escalated. Kevin purchased a Glock 26 handgun, which he picked up 5 days later. Then just days after that, he bought a second weapon, a Glock 19. He received it 3 days before the incident. And around that same time, he made another decision. He bought a ticket to one of Christina's concerts. For the first time, this wasn't just online anymore. He was closing the distance. On June 9, 2016, Kevin paid a cab driver $200 for a round trip from his home in St. Petersburg to Orlando. He didn't bring any luggage, just himself. And when he arrived, he checked into the Courtyard by Marriott, paid $269 for the room, one night, scheduled to check out the next morning. Then he made his way to the venue, the Plaza Live. Before going in, he stopped at a nearby clothing store, buying a black hat. Then he got in line. Once inside the venue, he kept his distance, picked a spot far from the stage, head down, arms crossed, just watching, waiting. And after the performance, as she always did, Christina stayed behind for a meet and greet with fans. Over 100 people were still inside the venue. One by one, they lined up to meet her. Photos, autographs, quick moments, and eventually, the line began to clear until Kevin stepped forward. He didn't say anything, so Christina, doing what she always did, opened up to hug him. And in that moment, everything broke. Kevin pulled out a handgun and multiple shots rang out. He fired at close range. Christina was hit. Her brother Marcus, who was standing just feet away, immediately rushed him. They struggled, right there in front of everyone. And in the middle of that chaos, Kevin turned the gun on himself, ending his own life, going out like a coward.
What we do know is that according to police, he drove about 120 miles from his home in St. Petersburg to her concert in Orlando.
The suspect in this case is not from Orlando. The suspect traveled to Orlando apparently to commit this crime and then had plans to travel back to where he came from.
And just like that, it was over. In a matter of seconds, a fan had taken the life of the very artist he claimed to love. Christina Grimmie was just 22 years old, a career still unfolding, a future still ahead of her. She had built a connection with people through her voice, her presence, her openness. And that same openness, that same accessibility that brought fans closer to her, also brought the wrong person within reach, unfortunately. Because the truth is, you never really know who's watching you through a screen, and sometimes the people who feel the closest to you are the ones you've never met. The next story we're going to cover is the Dimebag Darrell story. Dimebag Darrell Abbott was the driving force behind Pantera, one of the most influential metal bands of that era. Through the early and the mid-90s, the band built a cult following, earned Grammy nominations, and became a focal point for a generation of metal fans. Dimebag wasn't just a guitarist. For a lot of people, he represented that sound and that moment in metal. In 2003, Pantera split. Dimebag moved forward with his brother Vinnie Paul and formed a new band, Damage Plan. Their album dropped in February 2004, and they were back on the road playing clubs. Life was continuing, the music was continuing, but in the background, something else was starting to take shape. And that starts with Nathan Gale. Nathan Gale was a Pantera fan. Before things deteriorated, his connection to the band looked like the kind of devotion people around him recognized. He listened to Pantera to psych himself up before football games. In late 2003, Gale left the Marines after serving less than half of a typical 4-year military service. His mother told reporters he had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia during his time in the Marines. She also said she did not know whether he was taking the medication he came home with. At some point of his admiration, Gale's connection to the band appears to have shifted into something much darker. A former friend told reporters that Gale once showed up, carrying pages of Pantera lyrics, and insisted they were his, that the band had stolen them from him. According to that same reporting, Gale also claimed he planned to sue the band. So the admiration hadn't disappeared, it had turned into something else. In April 2004, Gale showed up at a Damage Plan concert at Bogart's in Cincinnati. He jumped on stage mid-show and had to physically be removed. During the struggle with police, authorities said he caused about $1,800 in damages. Cincinnati police identified him as a suspect and labeled the actions criminal, damaging, and endangering. No charges were filed because the band members didn't want to return to Cincinnati for court. The warning signs were there, but it went nowhere. On December 8, 2004, that afternoon before the show, Gale was at a tattoo studio in Marysville, where witnesses said he became angry and started yelling after being told the shop would not order tattoo equipment for him. That night, Damage Plan was scheduled to play at Rosa Villa, a club in Columbus, with no metal detectors and unarmed security guards. Witnesses differed on exactly how Gale got in. Some thought he jumped an 8-foot wooden fence, while others believed he came through an open door behind the stage. Either way, he got in. The lights dimmed. The band launched into their first song. Then a man in a hooded sweatshirt ran on stage and opened fire. According to reports from the scene, Gale dodged 2 band members, grabbed Dimebag Darrell, and shot him at least 5 times in the head at close range. Within minutes, 3 others were also killed during the rampage. 2 band employees were also hospitalized. Stage video later revealed by police captured the audio of the chaos. An initial burst of shots, voices, shouting that the gunman had reloaded, and then more shots roughly 3 minutes later.
Chaos. Police say minutes after Gale shot Dimebag, he takes a hostage and reloads his gun behind a speaker.
The rampage ended when Officer James D. Niggemeyer shot and killed Gale with a shotgun as Gale held a man in a headlock. The entire thing lasted less than 5 minutes. In the days that followed, police made one thing clear. They did not have a confirmed motive, and they acknowledged that they may never know exactly what happened. Some witnesses claimed Gale had been yelling accusations that Dimebag broke up Pantera, but police could not verify those accounts. Fans gathered in the parking lot outside Rosa Villa, and vigils were held. In May 2005, a grand jury cleared Officer Niggemeier of wrongdoing. The following month, Columbus police released a stage videotape to news organizations. What started as a concert ended multiple lives. 4 lives gone, including Dimebag Darrell. He was only 38 years old. And the saddest part is, it wasn't random. This was a fan. Someone who had started in the same place as everyone else in that room. Same music, same admiration, but somewhere along the way, that admiration turned into something else. And that's what makes stories like this so uncomfortable, because it forces you to realize that the line between admiration and obsession isn't always as clear as people think. A lot of times, the people who love you the most are the ones who can lose themselves in that love. Appreciate you for watching. If you made it this far, drop a like on this video. It really helps the channel. My name is Blackie Speaks. Nice to meet you. What do you guys think about these obviously very sad stories? A lot of talent lost, for nothing. So I'm just curious what you guys think about this. Please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys in the next